clear, clean, and refreshing. Just turn on a tap, and there it is. The people of Louisville take it for granted. And that's the way it should be. We're the Louisville Water Company. You probably don't think much about us, and that's good. It's our job to go unnoticed. Because you only notice water when you don't have any, or when it doesn't taste right. But our water is abundant and recognized nationally for quality and taste. So what's to notice? In the early days, the people who settled Louisville also took water for granted. And why not? They had a whole river full of it. The mighty Ohio, America's first superhighway. The river, of course, brought people to Louisville. And more people. And the people brought disease, typhoid, cholera. Soon, the gateway to the West became the graveyard of the West. And so, the Louisville Water Company was born. With an extraordinary effort, the Louisville Water Company cleaned up the city's water supply, saving countless lives and setting a precedent for leadership that continues to inspire the company's efforts. Today, the Louisville Water Company leads the way in research and technology. Scientists and other water quality control experts from all over the world visit here to study and learn. Because the Louisville Water Company is considered a standard of excellence for the industry. We willingly share our knowledge and research with the world. But even as we do so, we continue exploring new ideas to cope with the challenges of the future. We do all this with a simple objective: to continue to be the one vital necessity that the people here never have to think about. The water company you take for granted. In 1991, the water company removed the statues for safekeeping as the rest of the tower was being renovated. The group of statues that you see are not the original group that were on the water tower. There were 10 other statues that in 1860, when the tower was constructed, were also around it. And they were destroyed, unfortunately, in a tornado in 1890 that also took the tower down. The original water tower was made out of wood, and now they've replaced it with metal, steel, and iron. And it's kind of an early example of historic preservation. And also in the 1890s, the economy at that time, they were in much more severe recession than we currently are. And so replacing the statues was kind of out of the question, because the water company, as best we can figure, they had their money spread out in other projects. And so we believe that there were 3 men, associates of the water company at that time, who purchased these statues out of pocket. It appears that after the tornado struck, The statues that were replacing those, it seems they tried to keep the original spirit intact. And what you see are representations of the seasons. There's summer, spring, autumn, and winter are in this group. But there are also different elemental symbols. In particular, there are 3 water symbols. Hebe is considered a water symbol, and she's the one holding the pitcher and pouring into the small goblet. Neptune, of course, is a water symbol. The Naiad, which is a figure holding the urn, pouring out of the urn, is also considered a water symbol. Mercury, he's not only a god of science, he's the messenger of the gods, he's also the god of travel, god of thievery, and he's also an air symbol. The one that most people are interested in is the Indian hunter and dog, and it's just conjecture, but since Diana, the goddess of the hunt, was in the original group, it could be very possible that Diana simply was not in stock at that time. The group that you see behind us they were purchased from a catalog from the J.W. Fisk Company of New York. Or it could be, too, that they needed more of an earth symbol, and the Indian hunter kind of functions as that role, too. And it's nice that I think that there's more of an American element to the group, because they're primarily Greek and Roman gods and goddesses. Unfortunately, Flora fell off the tower in 1980 and wasn't repairable. The statues are made out of zinc, which was a common architectural and garden ornamentation metal of that time. It doesn't corrode and oxidize like iron. It won't rust. It's also less expensive than bronze. And its melting point, the temperature at which it could be turned into a pourable liquid, is also less than bronze. And so they had some real workable conditions. It's interesting when you look inside them. They're made up of about 50 to 75 individual pieces that are soldered together. And that's part of the problem in restoring them, is that you can't weld on them like other metals. It's all lead solder that joins them together. The smaller ones weigh between 250 and 300 pounds. Neptune and the Indian hunter weigh much more. There was a process involved in determining who would restore them, and the winning bid was from the Venus Bronze Works of Detroit, Michigan. When the statues were taken down, one thing that was really noticeable was all the layers of paint had really obscured the detail. In looking at a paint chip, it was about the thickness of an eggshell, and we were told that you could count 26 layers of lead paint that were on them. There also were several objects that were missing from the statues. For example, Hebe was missing the goblet, and that had to be reconstructed. Neptune was missing 2 tines from the trident. The leash was missing from the dog and the Indian. There were little parts that had broken off due to weathering, we think, over the years. There were also some bullet holes that were repaired. So the original group of statues that was up in 1860, all 10 of them cost less than $200 for all of them. And by 1890, Indian hunter and dog was $300 alone in the catalog. Theodore Skowden, the engineer who designed this building, and I think it's kind of nice in his vision and why this is such a unique spot. In addition to being the oldest water tower that still exists in the United States, it's also a masterpiece of industrial architecture. Mr. Skowden's original vision was for people to come out and picnic on this spot, and when you consider that this is an industrial building, that's really a nice aesthetic that he's put together.
The water tower at Zorn Avenue and River Road was constructed in the late 1850s. It was designed to handle surges inside the water main connecting the old pumping station to the reservoir where Veterans Hospital now stands. The 169-foot tower was used for most of the 19th century. It was then and still is one of this community's most prominent landmarks. In 1890, a tornado severely damaged the tower, but it was restored. One of the 10 Greek statues topping the Corinthian columns was damaged beyond repair. An Indian and his dog now complete the circle. In 1970, the water tower was recognized by the American Water Works Association as a national landmark. In the mid-70s, a group calling themselves Friends of the Water Tower raised money for renovation work. The company also contributed. The work was completed in the early 80s and was the last major work done on the water tower. Today, at a distance, the tower is still a majestic sight, but closer inspection reveals all sorts of problems. This national landmark is in dire need of a paint job. Peeling paint has exposed wooden beams to the elements, and large rust stains can be seen leaching through the tin work. Window panes are broken. Wooden frames are severely warped. Unwanted visitors have also moved in. Birds have secured homes at the top of the decorative columns, and insects have built nests. The circular sidewalk is in pretty good condition, with the exception of these two stones, which are badly cracked. Mortar joints are crumbling on the brick wall below the balcony. The wooden doors are in fair shape, with the exception of a missing doorknob. For security purposes, a deadbolt lock is used. Interior problems prove to be much the same as those plaguing the outside. Consultants have estimated that it will take a minimum of $345,000 to preserve the structural integrity, make necessary repairs, and to paint the water tower. Water Company officials suggest a $500,000 budget. The renovation work should extend the life of the tower by at least 75 years, with the exception of periodic painting.
Police are telling us a very large diesel fuel storage tank has ruptured and is leaking.
The Monongahela River is laced with floating booms as workers try to net the huge spill of nearly 2 million gallons of diesel fuel dumped into the river Saturday night.
85 miles, 6 inches deep along the Monongahela River and into the Ohio River, which
And for many of you, the water has just dried up.
I want to apologize to the people of the Pittsburgh area for the inconvenience they've experienced as a result of this incident. The company expects to pay for the cost of cleanup and to reimburse appropriate government agencies for the reasonable expenses that they have experienced in connection with this incident.
The facts are now more clear. A storage tank at Ashland Oil's product terminal near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania ruptured. The surrounding dikes were unable to contain the sudden rush of diesel fuel, and 715,000 gallons found its way into the Monongahela River, disrupting water service in a 3-state region. Ashland's assistance to the affected areas was swift, committing whatever resources were needed. Ashland's on-site management team coordinated cleanup efforts. Among the company's efforts, professional cleanup companies were quickly hired and put in place. The company provided vacuum trucks to collect oil from the river in the dike area. Ashland provided deflection barges, skimmer barges, booms, and a corporate helicopter, which was used to track concentrations of oil in the river. The company also provided barges filled with water to affected cities which requested it, and boats used to track and analyze the spill were made available to federal and regional agencies. Ashland's personnel worked around the clock, assisting with the cleanup and maintaining constant contact with state and local water officials, as well as the EPA, Coast Guard, and other government groups. Once water service was restored to Pennsylvania communities, news coverage turned downstream.
The pollution is just above Wheeling, West Virginia right now. It's expected to roll past that town sometime tomorrow.
The town of Steubenville, Ohio has declared a water emergency because its Ohio River water intake has been fouled by millions.
As the oil slick continued down the Ohio River, news coverage began to focus on Ashland's responsiveness and candor.
Well, Ashland Oil made good on its promise to pay the bills for the spill today, giving a check to the county for more than $200,000. Commission Chairman Tom Forrester accepted the payment of $210,000 for payroll, overtime, and materials the county has tallied so far. Forrester praised Ashland for its quick response on the check, saying the county is still waiting for payment for other disasters that happened a long time ago.
I will say that Ashland has been helpful in the cleanup. They've been forthcoming with the information about the tank itself, and they have thus far been willing to assume their share of all of the financial responsibility. So
the company has done a first-rate job of responding. They've used all the same contractors that we would use if we called them in. They've done all the same things we would do.
The print media, while acknowledging the seriousness of the spill, applauded the company's actions. In the Huntington Herald-Dispatch, "We can't help but say well done to John Hall, Ashland's no-nonsense chairman and chief executive officer." In the Louisville Courier-Journal, "In taking the risk to say that Ashland held itself accountable for what happened, he has joined Lee Iacocca and very few other top executives in America who can now speak for their companies and know they will be listened to with respect by the press and the public." The company's efforts were not limited to cleanup operations. Ashland set up a Pittsburgh service office headed by Corporate Vice President Philip Block. And to further assist those individuals with claims against Ashland, it was announced that Crawford & Company, a nationally recognized claims adjusting firm, also opened an office in Pittsburgh. Crawford & Company, which has experience in handling oil spill claims, also established an office in Steubenville, Ohio. To assess the environmental impact of the spill, Ashland has awarded a grant of $250,000 to the University of Pittsburgh's Center for Hazardous Materials Research. The center is conducting an independent study on the effects of the spill into the Monongahela and Ohio rivers.
Based on other oil spills that we've studied and looked at and the ability of biological systems to recover and regenerate themselves, we think that there will not be any significant long-term impacts.
Ashland Oil has operated in the Ohio River Valley for 64 years without an incident of this type. We're proud of our record, and we're embarrassed that this unfortunate incident has occurred. Now the plume is largely dissipated, and we're turning our attention to investigations to determine what caused the incident and to organizational and procedural changes that will help us make sure an incident of this type is never repeated.
On May 26th, Ashland Oil released the report conducted by Battelle Memorial Institute, which detailed the cause of the storage tank collapse. According to Battelle's investigation, the tank failure was caused by a brittle steel fracture emanating from a dime-sized flaw in the tank's bottom core steel plate. Ray Meslow, Battelle project manager, headed the investigation.
We did find out a couple of things about this flaw. One, it was produced by an oxyacetylene torch. The reason for that is explained in your handout, but I'll tell you that we found iron carbide on the surface and a heat-affected zone around the flaw that can only be produced by a flame cut. We also determined that this flaw was in the base plate material of the tank. It was not in a weld. It was below a weld. And we have determined that the flaw was in the plate prior to the initial construction of the tank at Whiskey Island, Ohio.
To ensure that an accident of this type doesn't happen again, Ashland has made the Battelle report available to industry and the public. The company also conducted a comprehensive review of its facilities and has made appropriate procedural and organizational changes. In addition, ERT, an environmental consulting firm, has been retained to conduct detailed studies of the rivers and affected wildlife. From the beginning of the incident, Ashland's comprehensive action and responsiveness has been motivated by the company's definition of responsibility.
I think you have to look at it in human terms. You have to try to do what's right. And that's what we're trying to do.
Saturday, January 2nd, an Ashland oil storage tank near Pittsburgh collapses, spilling an estimated 750,000 gallons of No. 2 fuel oil into the Monongahela River. The story would top national headlines for days.
River traffic has been halted south of Pittsburgh. Supplies of drinkable water are shrinking now, and the National Guard has been called out to help bring in more water.
Containment efforts fail, and the slick begins its unpredictable journey down the Ohio towards Louisville, 600 river miles downstream. The estimated arrival date between the 17th and 20th of January.
And it's sort of stagnated around there. That was our report this morning about 10.
Orsanco, the Ohio River Valley Water Sanitation Commission, a state and federally funded sampling and reporting network, immediately begins feeding downstream utilities spill information. Orsanco Information Specialist Jeannie Isom.
We were notified Saturday evening of the spill that occurred on the Monongahela from Ashland Oil. We immediately took steps to notify downstream water users that it was coming. On Monday, we organized ourselves in such a way that we would conduct sampling and get ourselves familiarized enough with the spill that we could answer any inquiries.
A computer bulletin board connecting the Louisville Water Company with Orsanco headquarters in Cincinnati provides oil updates twice daily. By January 5th, the Louisville Water Company lab is receiving oil samples from upstream utilities and running tests to determine the most effective treatment. Cold weather and icy conditions drastically slow down the flow of the river. Arrival projections are pushed back to mid-February. The staff reviews emergency preparedness plans, and January 6th, the company issues the first of many press releases. The message is simple. When the spill arrives, we can treat it. The quality of your water at the tap will not be compromised. For nearly 2 weeks, all is quiet. The Louisville Water Company continues to monitor upstream conditions and prepare for the oil's eventual arrival. Meanwhile, Mother Nature decides to speed things up. January 19th. Heavy rains along the Ohio Valley increased the flow of the river by 6 or 7 times its previous pace. Louisville arrival projections are pushed up to January 25th through the 27th, only a week away. The spill will arrive early, but in a much weakened state. The rains dilute the oil concentrations. Muddy river conditions remove even more. Saturday morning, the parking lot at the Crescent Hill filter plant is filled. Inside, treatment plans are put into action under the watchful eye of the local media.
Big Clifty is 560, so just about 100 miles for all intents and purposes. So we're probably a day after first evidence at Cincinnati.
Extra chemicals and equipment are secured.
But he has the stock and everything. I could say I could probably have it in a couple hours if we wanted it fast.
We have scheduled shipments. We have scheduled shipments for Sunday. We have scheduled shipment for Monday. We have scheduled shipment for Tuesday. And I believe, I believe we have one for Thursday also, the 28th.
So you're talking about 40,000 pounds a day?
Virtually 40,000 pounds in each load. And
so you're keeping 6 days available, is that what you're telling me?
Basically, yes. Come Sunday midnight tomorrow, tonight, we ought to be online, and maybe not with the clay, but we ought to be online with the carbon and the potassium permanganate, and use that as a hedge on when this is going to get here. Now, our alternative is to send somebody up to Big Clifty today and place somebody up there with this fluorimeter and start monitoring. Well, number one,
both suggestions are adopted. As a precautionary measure, pre-treatment of the river water with potassium permanganate and powdered activated carbon is started Saturday, January 23rd. Sunday, this core group meets again. All is running smoothly.
Basically, all the water quality data looks good. Our turbidities are up a little bit in the coags, but that's to be expected to some degree.
The lab begins around-the-clock surveillance for oil. A special sampling schedule has distribution crews busy collecting raw water samples, ensuring that the lab's information is always up to date. With all in order, the waiting begins.
Yes, this is Jerry Ford with the Louisville Water Company, returning your call. Good morning.
That weekend and the following week, company spokesperson Jerry Ford becomes a regular on all major radio and television newscasts and is frequently quoted by the paper. Spill updates are distributed daily to the press. The message remains the same.
The whole thing is treatable. It's another day at the office, almost.
Industrial relations were also put to the test. A technical crew from Philip Morris, a local cigarette manufacturer, visited the 3rd Street office. Officials worried that even small concentrations of oil in the finished product would harm their water-sensitive operations. Other industrial leaders had similar concerns. The Louisville Water Company provided the information they needed anytime, day or night. They continue to operate problem-free.
If there is any concern, just give us a call back or we'll get back with you.
Louisville Water Company customers also have questions. Employee spill updates provide answers.
No, it is safe to drink, I assure you. If it was not, we would be the first to let you know. It is safe to drink.
January 27th, the spill arrives. Oil concentrations peak at just over 65 parts per billion. That compared to 1,000 parts per billion closer to the spill site. Treatment strategies are on target. The oil is completely removed. Customer calls still trickle in, but for the most part, questions were answered and fears calmed before the spill even arrived. February 3rd, the company issues an all clear. Again, as a precautionary measure, pre-treatment at a reduced rate is continued until February 10th. Sunday, the 14th, this ad appears in the Courier-Journal. It re-emphasizes that the spill did not affect the public's drinking water and recaps removal efforts. The local press is complimented on keeping the public informed. The spill passes, but the bookkeeping is just beginning. All oil-related costs, including those for extra manpower, equipment, and chemicals, are kept in a special account. Those expenses will be totaled and billed to Ashland Oil.
This is Kentuckiana's News Channel, WHAS 11.
Well, to help with that problem, drinking water from Louisville is on its way to Des Moines tonight. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, has asked the Louisville Water Company to donate more water. Last week, the water company packed up 10,000 gallons of drinking water for the people in Des Moines. This week, they will send 25,000 more gallons to that city.
We started contacting the governor's office in Iowa, and I called the mayor in Des Moines and said, you know, we have this excess capacity, much like we did 3 years ago during the drought, where we called up throughout states and cities in Indiana and throughout Kentucky, saying we have this excess capacity. It is always available in disaster situations. We wanted to make...
FEMA has asked that only one truck with 5,000 gallons of water travel to Des Moines each day. That will help avoid traffic jams on the few roads that remain open in the flooded area.
Kentuckiana continues to reach out to the flood victims. Tonight, more Louisville drinking water is on its way to Iowa at the request of federal disaster officials. Jan Keaton has the latest.
It's a gift from one river city to another. Over the next 5 days, a total of 25,000 gallons of bottled Ohio River water is bound for Des Moines, Iowa.
They're saying they need this water for storage. They need the water to be available in 1-gallon containers. And they only want one truck a day because of the difficulty of access in and out of Des Moines, Iowa, and across the Mississippi.
Last week, when the flood cut off Des Moines' running water, the Louisville Water Company shipped out 2 truckloads of drinking water. Although the Des Moines system is expected to be back online later this week, it may be a month before the city's water is safe to drink.
Working in the spirit of Wave Country, this is Wave 3 First News with Jackie Hayes for Tuesday, July 20th.
Well, there is a flood of help going to the flood victims along the Mississippi River, and a lot of it is coming from people right here in Wave Country. Donations of food, cleaning supplies, and even water are being collected. Tonight, Ken Marshall is live at the Louisville Water Company, where volunteers are still filling bottles of fresh water to send. Ken?
Well, Jackie, behind me, you can see some of those volunteers. There are about 25 of them here, and they've been bottling furiously. They go through about 5,000 gallons a day of fresh drinking water, about 25,000 gallons a week, and it's going to be sent up After they finish there, it comes over here, it gets loaded on these pallets and then sent out to Davenport, Iowa. That's where the flooding has had some problems with the treatment plant up there, and it's made drinking water impossible to find and being treated up there in Davenport, Iowa. So these people are helping out the folks up in Davenport, Iowa, but this isn't the only place where they're lending a hand. At the Louisville Water Company, 5,000 gallons of water a day are being bottled and sent to Iowa. The flooding in Des Moines knocked out the treatment plant. Now, these 25 volunteers hope to make life in the disaster area a little easier.
I don't mind helping. I think it's a good deed, good job to do, the need to do it. I don't mind at all. Yeah. We was here last night at 10 o'clock doing this right here. You know, as long as they need it, we're willing to help.
As the river rises, bottled water is in high demand. Everyday drinking supplies are being knocked out of action.
Hello again. I'm Jean West.
Hello, Jean, and good evening, everyone. I'm Doug Prophet, reporting live tonight above the big flood wall that protects historic West Main Street in downtown Louisville. The Kentuckiana's News Channel has learned tonight that the Louisville Water Company is gearing up for a possible major effort to ship drinking water to the people, the flood-ravaged victims along the Mississippi River Valley. There is still one catch, though. They need someone to ship all that water to that area, and they're still looking for that person or company tonight.
Our Doug Prophet is live with the very latest on that story. Doug?
Good afternoon, Jean. Soon, a lot of the water you see right here in the Crescent Hill reservoirs in Louisville will be heading west. Well, the reason the water company says it got about 6 calls last night at about 6 o'clock, shortly after our report, from people interested in shipping the water, and more rolled in this morning. Even at WHAS, we talked to many independent trucking companies, folks who were just interested in helping out in the effort. Well, why? They've all been seeing the pictures that we've been watching over the last few days. From the air over Des Moines, Iowa, flooded sewage plants have contaminated all of the drinking water there. 250,000 people are looking for clean water. That's why you see them carrying anything they can find to the water trucks there. They're standing in long lines, a lot of frustration. And now the Louisville Water Company is ready to jump in and ease some of that pain. What happened overnight? Well, with us now live is Barbara Crow with the Water Company. Who came forward and who are you guys going to use now?
You guys did a good job. We told you yesterday that we did water, but we didn't do transportation. And as of a few minutes ago, we already had 10 calls, large and small businesses, independent truckers. We even had people that just wanted to call and offer us some good advice. We had a lady that called who said she and her husband had an empty school bus. They could pack it with anything we wanted, and they drive it anywhere we wanted it to go. We had a gentleman that called and said, I want to do something, and I have this great idea. We know that there are a lot of flood victims out there, and they need people to move their things.
But you've chosen 2 companies, right?
2 companies, Cisco Food Services and Frito-Lay came through with some pretty large trucks. We're going to use their services. We also had a box company, Business Paper, who is going to made us an offer that we couldn't refuse on boxes.
And how much will they be able to take starting tonight, as I understand?
We hope that by tonight we have 5,000 gallons of water, 5,000 1-gallon bottles of water ready to go, and that we'll be on the road sometime early evening, and by morning they'll be drinking Louisville water in Iowa.
All right, Barbara Crow, thank you very much for joining us live here on the reservoir. They hope to start bottling that water sometime later this afternoon. Gene will be following that story for the news tonight right here live later today. Back to you.
All right, Doug, thank you.